Welcome to Freedom Window. I'll be doing an electoral projection for 2020. But before I do that, I just want to encourage you, if you're tired of the media bias when it comes to polling and how the polls are reported, subscribe to my channel. I release the internals on every poll that I include in my average, and I do an analysis so that you know exactly why the poll is saying what it's saying and whether or not the poll should be trusted, which many shouldn't be. So give us a subscribe. Also, if you like the video, please remember to like the video. It helps the video out. All right, let's take a look at the Electoral College. We see here that Joe Biden will start with 209 electoral votes, and Donald Trump will start with 122. One state that's worth talking about is New Mexico. There's an outside chance for Donald Trump to pick up New Mexico. I don't think he will, but there's an outside chance. I just wanted to note that. All right, the first state we're going to look at is Florida, and then followed by North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and Iowa. And the reason we're going to look at those four states first is because they release the most data. We know exactly how many Republicans and Democrats there are and independents in each state, how many of those are going to vote early or have requested an early mail ballot, I should say, and how many of those have returned their early mail ballot or voted early in person. These numbers are critical for making a projection because I can apply them to a model that I built which incorporates poll expectations, which should tell us which party is over or underperforming the polls, and that will help us to make a good, solid projection. So let's look at Florida first. Now, okay, here we have what most people are looking at. This is the Target Smart data that you see most people talking about. This just tells you how many people have voted by each party in those states. And this is what you're hearing a lot from the press. The press is saying, wow, the Democrats are building an insurmountable lead. Look how many more voters they have than Republicans. Totally misleading. You have to look at this following data right here. This is an average of polls in the state of Florida asking people, are you going to vote early? And if you are, how are you going to vote? By mail or in person? 79% of Democrats said they would vote early. 52% of Republicans said they would vote early. Of the Democrats, 51% will vote by mail and 27.4% in person. And Republicans, 21% by mail and 29% in person. So let's apply those poll numbers to a model and see where it gets us. Now, I have taken the total requested mail ballots number and compared it to what we expect to see. And the Republicans are far exceeding expectations. This is a request early ballot ratio. What you need to know is a 1 is you have hit your expectation set by the polls exactly. If you exceed 1, you've gone beyond it. So right now the Democrats are just approaching what the polls expect, and the Republicans have long surpassed it, and independents are just surpassing it. If you actually are going to hit your poll expectation, and that's right here, your number's going to end up around 1.25, 1.3, where the Republicans already are. So we know they're going to hit their polling expectation, probably exceed it. We don't yet know whether the Democrats are going to hit their polling expectation, which is a problem, because if they can't hit that, they're going to lose Florida. And I'll be watching these numbers. The way they've been trending, it does not look good. I think it's a pretty clear-cut case that Donald Trump is going to win the state. And just to buttress that, if you see here, this is the polls percent reporting they will vote earlier mail in person. Democrats were 79%, Republicans 52%, Independents 68%. 49% of Democrats have voted, so they still have 30% to go, all right, to meet the number expected. Already 43.8% of Republicans have voted early. That's the total number. So they don't have that far to go to meet what their polls expect. And you can see here, independents, they've only gotten a little less than halfway to what we expect. That tells you one thing, folks. Republicans are exceeding poll expectations, and the odds that Donald Trump is going to win Florida are very good right now. I'm going to give the state to Donald Trump. Next state, North Carolina. Okay, here we see the Target Smart data right now. Democrats have 40% more who have returned their ballots than Republicans. So again, what you're hearing in a lot of the media, people who don't really know what they're talking about, they're saying, hey, look, the Democrats are overperforming. They're doing great. Let's take a look at the actual numbers. What the polls say. The polls say in North Carolina, the average of polls say that 72% of Democrats are going to vote early and 52% of Republicans are going to vote early. 26% by mail for Democrats, 47% in person, and 12% by mail Republican, and 40% in person. Let's apply that to the model and see where we're at. The request early ballot ratio for Republicans is 1.04, so they are ahead of their polling expectation already. Democrats are a little closer in North Carolina than they were in Florida, and independents are actually ahead of Republicans. Now, here is why that's good news, likely for the GOP. Typically, for Democrats to win an election, they have to have a substantially higher turnout than Republicans, and that is because independents often will trend with the Republicans, especially in a close election. A lot of independents are Republican leaners, more so than Democrat leaners. Also, a lot of Democrats, or a substantial number of them, are legacy Democrats. They are really Republicans in terms of how they vote, but they haven't changed their registration. So Democrats have got to exceed their expectation. Right now, this ratio is pointing to a final voter turnout of 35% Republican, 36% Democrat, and 29% Independent. That's not good enough for the Democrats. And keep in mind, this is changing every day. You can see the last four days, you can see that the ratio has shrunk. If you look on 1020, it was 39 to 33 Republican, 39D to 33R. That's gone all the way now to 36 to 35. And it's been getting closer each and every day. So as the early vote comes out, Republicans are really doing a lot better. It's looking very good for Donald Trump in North Carolina. So I will be giving North Carolina to Donald Trump. Next, the state of Iowa. Okay, here's the state of Iowa. Again, you see the same trend. More Democrats have voted and have requested ballots than Republicans in the state of Iowa. So you're hearing reporting, oh, you know, the Democrats, they're doing great. They're going to do a good job. Reality, let's do a reality check. What do the polls tell us? The polls tell us in the state of Iowa, the Democrats are going to vote early to the tune of 63%, and Republicans are going to vote early to the tune of 32%. Applying that to our model, how are they doing with respect to actual performance? In the state of Iowa, Republicans are exceeding their expectations. They are now at a 1.11 early request ballot ratio. Democrats are at 0.98. So Republicans are probably going to hit their number exactly. Democrats, it's a good chance that they will not hit their early expected number. Now keep in mind, the polls in this state, like all four of these states, have it very close. Or the first three states anyway. Florida, North Carolina, and Iowa. So any indication from these numbers that they're not living up to their poll expectations means that state's going to go in the other direction. So far in these first three states, that is Donald Trump. I will show you in the state of Iowa. Already, estimated turnout for Republicans based on this model is 89%. So I'm going to have to make an adjustment because I assume the very highest they can go is 85%. So let's adjust that early turnout there. Okay, so if we get 37.5, good. All right, that gives the Republicans a request early ballot ratio of 1.07, and that hits 85% likely turnout for Republicans in Iowa. There are more Republicans in Iowa than there are Democrats. Right now, Iowa is looking very good. If you look here, you can see that it is likely that Republicans will outnumber Democrats in the state of Iowa in the final vote by a 5-to-4 ratio. This state is very likely to go for Donald Trump. Now, Pennsylvania, this is a big one. Pennsylvania, this is the state where the media is really certain that Joe Biden is in good position, and this is why. If you look at the mail-in and early in-person ballots returned, 71% of them are Democratic votes. And if you look at requested, 64% were Democrats, 25% were Republicans. So you can see it's looking like a blue wave in the state of Pennsylvania until you consider the polling. What do the polls say will happen in the state of Pennsylvania? 52% of Democrats were expected to vote early, and Republicans, only 21% were expected to vote early. That is a big difference in a huge state. So how are they performing when we apply it to the model? Okay, here is the Pennsylvania model. If you look at the total requested mail ballots and you compare that with the poll expectations, again, the Republicans are ahead of expectations. They have a 1.03 request early ballot ratio. the Democrats are lagging at 0.87. So you can't just look at the hard and fast number of how many people have voted and say, oh, well, that means that party's going to win. You have to understand, the Republicans are going to have an overwhelming vote. 78% of their vote is going to come on election day itself. Only 21% is expected to come early. Now, the Republicans are hitting their expectation. The Democrats are not. So if you apply this turnout expectation to each segment of the electorate, you end up with an estimate that 80% of Republicans are going to turn out and vote, and only 58% of Democrats. Now you may say that's impossible. That is not impossible. Last time around, only 62% of Democrats turned out to vote, and that was in a non-pandemic year. 72% of Republicans turned out to vote last time, and Republicans are less afraid of the pandemic. So if that model turns out to be correct, this is what the electorate will look like. 50% will be Republican, 43% will be Democrat, and this number is going to creep up little by little. This is my favorite model, the one I think is the most accurate. There is another model I use that's a little more favorable to Democrats, but I don't think it's as accurate. What this does is this takes the actual early vote and then it adds in the estimated election day. However, the actual early vote is very lopsided in Pennsylvania because so many Democrats, half of all their voters are coming out to vote early. Only 2 out of 10, 1/5, 20% of Republicans are going to vote early. That's why this model is a little off. The estimated total looks very good for Republicans. The Republicans could actually outnumber Democrats in this state. And if they do that, they will win the state. Now, one other model I look at are trend lines. This is based on the hard numbers that we actually have, people who've actually voted. So the Democrats are going to benefit here because they're getting out earlier. What this shows us, based on the last 5 days of early vote totals, is that Democrats will outnumber Republicans in the early vote by 975,000. My model anticipates that Republicans will outnumber Democrats by 964,000 on election day, which would give the Democrats a clear win. The problem is these trend lines don't really mean anything yet. The pollsters in Pennsylvania are showing Joe Biden up 5. My average shows Joe Biden up 0.7%. And I encourage you to go to the page, look and see exactly why that is. The chart here, I have had Biden ahead the entire time. So have all the other pollsters. The reason is there's only so much you can do with polling. If the pollsters are missing a segment of the electorate, the polls are going to be off. And the early vote is telling us, because the Republicans are exceeding poll expectations, that they are missing the early vote. And for that reason, I'm giving Pennsylvania to Donald Trump. Now, we can get to the rest of the states. If you question these first 4 calls, I'm going to put tags above here. There are extensive videos on each one of these states. You can come to my website, link to the YouTube channel. The website is freedomwindow.net, and take a look at the analysis of all of those states. It's all there. The models are solid. Okay, so let's move on now to Ohio. We'll pick off some of the easy fruit here. The polls in Ohio, what do they tell us? They are showing us that pollsters have it dead even in Ohio, which I find funny. I show Trump up 4, again, based on the polls. If Donald Trump wins in Pennsylvania, which I expect him to, he's going to win big in Ohio. So we're going to give Ohio to Donald Trump. Georgia. What do the polls tell us in Georgia? Okay, here we have Georgia. Pollsters actually have Trump ahead in Georgia, believe it or not. I've got him up 2.3 points. Trump has been ahead in Georgia since early August, according to both charts. I do not think Georgia is going to be an issue. 2018 was a year when the Democrats got their vote out, and then you see here the exit poll in 2018. It was still 41% Democrat, 48% Republican. Georgia is still a red state. Donald Trump will win the state of Georgia. State of Texas, another easy call. Okay, here we have the pollsters are showing Trump up 3.5 points. I'm showing him up 7.8%. Trump has been ahead in my average the entire time. Texas has never really been in doubt. I do think it got relatively close, but you have to know that in the state of Texas, it gets closer to election day. People start to pay attention. Texas is still going to be an R plus 6 to 8 state, R plus 6, 7 or 8 above Democrats, even with all the Democratic influx. So Texas will clearly go to Donald Trump. Now we go to the state of Arizona. What do the polls tell us in Arizona? This is a state that the media, they get excited about this every 4 years. They're certain that the Democrats can pick it off. The polls show, I'm showing a split verdict here. Polls are showing Biden up 1.5. I'm showing up Trump 1.5. I still think that Arizona is a Republican state. There is a hidden Trump vote out there. There are people who are not, they're just choosing not to answer the polls. They don't want to be polled. So they're hard to reach. And that hidden vote is going to manifest itself, at least in a state this close. They're going to put Trump over the top. I've demonstrated to you that the polls are missing Republicans in Florida, in Pennsylvania, in North Carolina, and Iowa. You have to know they're also missing voters in Arizona. So a state this close is going to swing to Trump. Now here's a tricky state, Nevada. If you look at the polling in Nevada, it's very close, and it is often very close. But the Democrat, they have unions out there that really are good at getting their vote out. And now you have a Democratic governor who sent ballots out to everyone, which, if you listen to Trump, that's going to be a serious problem because of fraud. I'm not so convinced, and let me tell you why. The polls are showing Biden up by 4 points. If you look at just the pollsters, I'm showing him up 1.6 percentage point. But take a look at this. This is data showing that right here, 216,000 versus 122,000 versus 94,000 unaffiliated. These are people who have not registered to vote and which way they're likely to lean. If Donald Trump can take advantage of that big treasure trove of votes, he's got a shot in Nevada. And there's a lot of excitement out there. I think he's got a chance, and it's easier to register to vote there now. Everyone's got a ballot. I think he's got an outside chance in Nevada, a better chance in Nevada than he does in New Mexico. But I am still going to give Nevada to the Democrats by a hair. But I do think that they will win it. Now we go up to New Hampshire. Trump came fairly close last time. In New Hampshire, I believe he lost it by 3 points. The polls have not been very good for Donald Trump in New Hampshire of late. I do not think he's going to be able to swing this state. I think he can make it close. He probably will make it close. But the problem is there's too many things going against him in New Hampshire. I see the Democrats winning New Hampshire. Okay, now we're going to take a look at Maine 2nd. I do have a little bit of polling in Maine 2nd. Okay, here we have Maine 2nd. There's not been a lot of polling. The polling there has been has shown, most of it has shown Biden up a little bit. On average, it shows Trump up a little bit. I think if Donald Trump is winning Pennsylvania, he'll certainly win Maine 2nd, and it will not be that close. So we'll give Donald Trump Maine 2nd. And Nebraska 2nd. Now, Nebraska 2nd is going to be a little harder for Donald Trump to swing than Maine 2nd. And it's going to be close one way or the other. The Republican congressman there is showing that he's up a little bit. This is a tough call. I'm going to go ahead and give it to Donald Trump because there clearly is a problem with the polling this time. They're missing a lot of the Trump vote, as I demonstrated in Florida, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and Iowa. Now, the big three up here up top. Let's first go with Michigan. The state of Michigan. I do not have the kind of data that we have from Pennsylvania in the state of Michigan. Okay, here we have the Target Smart data for the state of Michigan. Now, this is not absolutely accurate. You have to take this stuff with a grain of salt. This would suggest that, hey, the Republicans are doing pretty well, but you have to take it with a grain of salt. So I hate to say it, I'm kind of flying blind somewhat in Michigan. Let's take a look at the polls. Michigan has been Joe Biden's strongest state in the blue wall states. You get a lot of these polls showing him way ahead. Now, I adjust for that. I don't allow those polls to skew my average like so many other poll aggregators do. I show Joe Biden up 2.9% in Michigan, and the pollsters show him up 6.3% in Michigan. The charts, I did have Donald Trump spike to come a little ahead of Joe Biden in Michigan, but just briefly, there are some polls, the Trafalgar Group poll showing Trump up 2 points in Michigan. I do think that's a good poll. I don't think much of the Zia poll. They showed Trump up 4 points. But then at the same time, you have a Gravis marketing poll showing Biden up 13, which I think is crazy. But if you look at the internals of the poll do support the conclusion that Biden's up about 7 points. Fox News showed Joe Biden up 11 points in Michigan. Now, Fox News is definitely leaning Democrat this time. I'm going to do a separate video on that showing you that. They hired a Democratic-leaning pollster to do their polling this time. So all of their polling has been very high for the Democrats. But this same round of polling, they did Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and they showed Wisconsin and Pennsylvania within 5. They showed Michigan at 11. I do think Joe Biden's going to be able to pull it out in Michigan. He's got a lot going for him up there in terms of unions and people who are, dedicated to get him a win in that state. So I'm going to give Joe Biden the state of Michigan. Now, Minnesota. Donald Trump came close last time in the state of Minnesota. What does the polling show us? Pollsters have Biden up 4.3. I have Biden up 3.6. The problem for Donald Trump in Minnesota, it's a state that the Republicans just never win. I do have the Democracy Institute poll showing Trump ahead a little bit, which probably throws the average a little bit more toward Trump than might be justified. I do think that's a good poll, but it's a little bit dated. There hasn't been a lot of polling in Minnesota. I think in the end, Joe Biden is going to be able to squeeze it out there. The history of the state, there is some allegations that there's a little bit of fraud with respect to the ballots in Minnesota. But either way, I do think Joe Biden is able to pull it out in the state of Minnesota. Last, we're left with Wisconsin. What do the polls tell us? I have the state of Wisconsin very close. It looks like in the Wow counties, Donald Trump is doing pretty well. The pollsters are showing it about 5 points. You can see the most recent polling here, Ipsos has it at 6. That's an online poll. YouGov 5. Trafalgar Group has Biden ahead by 2 in Wisconsin. I nevertheless think that because of the vote that they are missing in Pennsylvania with respect to the pollsters, I do think that Donald Trump will be able to squeeze out a win in Wisconsin based strictly on the fact that they're missing a lot of support in Pennsylvania. And I think some of the early vote in Wisconsin, we could take a quick look at that. If you look at the early vote here, it's looking pretty good for Donald Trump. But again, you have to take this with a grain of salt. A lot of this is estimated. These aren't actual numbers like we see in Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Florida, and Iowa. But because those numbers look pretty good, and because a lot of the support that Trump is getting is being missed in those 4 states that we can actually analyze, I think Wisconsin is close enough. And remember, he won it last time. I do think Donald Trump will be able to swing it again. So this is our final tally. 290 electoral votes for Donald Trump, 240 electoral votes for Joe Biden. There's some wiggle room here. I do think Wisconsin could go either way. Pennsylvania could go either way. If Trump wins either one of these, however, either one of these states, he will win the election. And I feel very confident, again, based on my own model, that Donald Trump will win, at least in Pennsylvania. Share this video. Share it by text, email, however you do it. Share the video. Get the word out. Donald Trump is doing a lot better than the polls would suggest, and the evidence is here. If you look at these models, based on the type of early vote that we expected, the Democrats are not meeting their targets. The Republicans are exceeding their targets. Donald Trump looks very good heading 1 week out from Election Day. So share the video, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel, hit that bell,